Right, some of you know me already, others may not. So I'm a web accessibility consultant. That's my main day job. What that actually means is I actually help people, mainly developers, since I have a developer background. I actually help people understand accessibility, web accessibility, how to solve the issues they found. I actually do web accessibility testing as well, and I actually have written training courses that I deliver for developers too. I am part of the WordPress community though. I've used WordPress to build accessible websites for various people, small businesses, charities, etc., etc. Hence my involvement in this event and WordCamps, etc., etc. And here's me at WordCamp Sheffield a few years ago. Photo by Mike Peed, who's sitting in the front row here. There you go. Okay, so I've got half an hour. There's a fair bit to get through, so I'm going to whip through. There's some demos. What I'm going to do to help with the timing is I'm going to go through the slides first and then do little demos at the end. I've posted the link on Twitter to this presentation. It's already up on SlideShare. It's not the first time I've delivered it. So you can find all the stuff's there. There's a few links as we go through. So if you want to look it up on SlideShare, you don't have to write the links down. But I'm going to talk about a few tools here, hardware tools to start with. That's browser extensions and Favics. That's going to take up a bit of time. There's some really useful stuff around extensions for your browsers. Downloadable tools, that's standalone stuff. Assisted technology, that's also typically downloadable or you buy it. And also then right at the end, I'm going to talk about a WordPress plugin that can help improve the accessibility of your website. Bit of a stopgap, that one, but it can help, and I'll show you how. Right at the end, I'm just briefly going to mention in one sentence about how you can include accessibility testing in your development environment. It's going to be very brief because I've not actually tried it myself, but I've heard it's good. So here we go. The first thing then. So what are these tools for? Firstly, I use some of these tools to help me evaluate the accessibility of web pages, either as a sort of like an informal review that someone asks me to do, or as a more formal accessibility audit. And some of these tools are sort of the first things I reach for when I'm doing that. And when we get to talk about a couple of one or two of the extensions and also the WordPress plugin, we can actually talk about improving the accessibility of web pages and using the tool to make any website we're looking at more usable for certain user groups, which is a new thing. It's quite exciting on that side of things. So firstly, I'm going to talk about hardware tools, and very briefly I'm going to just mention this, the keyboard. The very first thing that I do when I'm actually doing an audit or an accessibility review of a website is to look at the website web pages and then actually use the keyboard, the tab key mainly, to actually tab around the pages to see where the focus goes. If I'm a sighted user but I've got a motor impairment, I might actually, instead of using a mouse, I haven't got one in front of me, there's one there, but you know what a mouse looks like, I might actually use the keyboard to actually move around. So the first things I'd be testing is to see whether everything that looks as though it ought to be able to be used by a mouse can actually be used by a keyboard. And it's funny, you find on a lot of websites there are things that can't be used by keyboard users, keyboard-only users, or that never get focus in the first place. Or also, as an issue we'll see, is that you don't know where focus is on the page. You'll also be using the Enter key to follow links, the spacebar as well to make selections, and the arrow keys for form controls, radio buttons, checkboxes, etc. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about hardware. The next thing I'm going to talk about, sorry, no problem, is browser extensions and Favics, and there's a few of these, right? So I'm not mainly going to talk about Chrome. Some of them are also available in Firefox as well, but Chrome is your go-to for a lot of this stuff. So let's look at the first one. Okay, what are we going to do? Yeah, these are set up in my browser. This is my Chrome browser, and I've got the ones highlighted in red are things that I'm going to talk about tonight. So they instantiate themselves often as these little icons in the top. I'll come on to cover these in a minute. Okay, the first one I'm going to talk about is a really useful tool for general accessibility testing, and it's called Wave. It's available for Chrome and Firefox too. And basically, it just does a series of accessibility tests on whatever page you happen to be on at the moment. Now, that can be a page that's live on the internet, but it can also be a page that's on your development server too. So it's useful if you're building stuff. Now, the results can be a bit cluttered, as we'll see a bit later on some pages, and there's no real interpretation of what it's finding. What it's great at is quickly showing you sort of where potential errors are. It's got a series of icons, and if I show you this demo screen here, it's got this collection of icons. I'm running out of battery here. It's got, like, the red ones are where it says, I know that you've made a mistake here in an accessibility perspective. Then it's got some green ones here, which is, actually, this looks good. I like this. And then there's a whole slew of yellow ones, which is, now, not sure about this, it's a bit suspect, you need to check these out. And then it's also got some other bits and pieces here, as it says structural elements, things like it shows you where the headings are, and also HTML5 and ARIA, this is sort of like landmarks on the page, various other bits and pieces. Once you get into this area, you kind of need to know what you're doing to actually interpret that stuff. But it's a very useful tool, it gives you a quick flavour of stuff. Now, whilst we're talking about automated tools like this, there is no one tool that can test everything in accessibility, because you need a human touch on a lot of these things. When people talk about accessibility, they often talk about alternate text for images. It takes a human to know the context for an image on a page, to know whether or not the alternate text for that image is correct. So that shows up some of the limitations of these tools, but it does give you some things. The next one I'm going to talk about is an extension called Axe, and it's created by a company called DQ, American company, and it's also available in Chrome and Firefox. It's free, and it's also a selection of accessibility tests on a single page. But the great thing about this is it does give you an explanation as to what the issues are that it finds, and it also, not only that, it also gives you some suggestions of how you can fix them as well. There aren't any downsides to this. It's just there's a lot of information there to interpret, and so this is what the screen looks like when you find it. It's basically, you do an inspect element in Chrome, and then it comes up with the options across the top, and then Axe. It usually it puts itself right at the end after your default Chrome ones. And it's got a whole lot of stuff going on here. It shows you, it's found 30 issues, and there's 4 which need review. That's the kind of like the yellow thing where you might need to look at this to check whether or not it's right. It's got sections down the right hand, it's got a list of errors down the left hand side here, and then the number, like 2 in this case, tell you how many errors of that sort it's found. Then you've got an option to highlight in your website, because this is next to your website, might be over here, the actual page itself. So if you do the highlight, it actually, whilst you're looking at elements, it actually highlights those on the page as well. We've got here, you can actually move between each of the individual issues. There are 2 for this one, so it's got 1 up 2 there. You can move to the previous one or the next one. What are we at next? Okay, impact. It's a little bit of an idea about whether this is a severe issue or not so severe an issue. Then there's the description, and then it shows you, in terms of like a CSS kind of way, whereabouts it's found it. Then it's got the actual source that's causing the problem, and then it gives you some idea of how you can solve it. And in this case, basically, the issue here is there's ARIA controls, an ARIA attribute, which is quite a useful one to use. It's got an empty value in there, which means that it's a meaningless ARIA attribute. Okay, the next tool I'm going to talk about, Focus Indicator. This is a Chrome extension. As far as I'm aware, it's not available for Firefox, and it helps out in websites where the developers or the designers, or maybe both, have actually removed the natural browser focus indication on a site. And I'll show you a site where that happens in a minute. And so for sighted keyboard users, it can render those sites almost impossible to use, or actually impossible to use. So what this does is it enhances the focus ring around each element. Now, those of you who are using Chrome on a regular basis may know that the default Chrome focus indication is a blue ring around an element. And that is there for an accessibility purpose because it's nice and obvious where keyboard focus is, right? But of course, some designers don't like that and they get rid of it, all right? But that makes it life awkward for sighted keyboard users. So that you can use this to actually help out. So this is a tool that actually people can use to enhance the accessibility of a website that they're looking at if they're struggling with it. It's also good for testing in that you can see if a website has no focus indication, you can actually see where focus actually is going. And I'll demo that on this men's health website. It's one of my favourite go-to sites for accessibility problems at the moment. That's the only reason I go to this site, obviously. I have to be careful with these go-to sites because what happens eventually is that someone fixes the error and I do a demo and say, this site's rubbish, right? And then they find out they fixed it.
You should email them first.
Yeah. Okay, the next one I'm going to talk about is a favlet, right? Favlets, remember them? God, they haven't been around for a long time, have they? Right, this is not a browser extension. I wish it was, because it would make a great browser extension, but it's a favlet. And so there's no picture of what it looks like. Because you can get to it, here's one of the URLs. As I say, the slideshare is up on SlideShare, so you can have a look at them there. And what the idea of this is, it actually gives you a summary on a page of the focus order of all the elements that can get keyboard focus on that page. So you can see which elements don't get focus, that perhaps should. You can see if the focus order is all over the shop, which used to be the case on WordPress websites many years ago with the comments box, which used to grab focus earlier on in a page. That's not true anymore. And it basically has to save you having to go tab to see where things are going to. And we can see on our favourite site here, this is what it shows like. I'll demo it in a moment. Next one I'm going to talk about is landmark navigation. Landmarks are a thing, quite a new thing, but they are a way of identifying regions of a page, like a banner, the main content of the page, a footer, like a form, a search area, or what have you, stuff like that. And this is available for Chrome and Firefox. And landmarks have traditionally, if traditionally is an appropriate word to talk about web technologies, traditionally only allowed screen reader users to actually get to stuff. And screen reader users can access the landmarks on a page and jump from one part of the page to the other as they see fit. However, that leaves sighted keyboard users to go tab through the page until to find the bits they're looking for. Now, on a page like the BBC News web, the homepage, you can imagine. I mean, there's 256 links on that page, right? Usually, or around that number. So that's quite a lot of messing about. The idea of this plugin is, as well as accessibility testing, it actually can be used by sighted keyboard users to actually highlight where the regions are on the page. And so that's really useful. So it's an accessibility aid. And here is an example, a screenshot of, this is my own website, and here are the landmarks. I need to make these a bit more complicated, a conversation we were having earlier, Gary. So I've got some simple landmarks set up. So what it does, it enables me to jump to various parts of the page, and usefully it actually highlights it in red when I've selected one, or when one is highlighted on the right-hand side. And here was the BBC website. You can see there's loads and loads of landmarks on this page, and this shows you how you've got like sort of landmark areas like HTML5 elements, like a nav element, but it's also given a label as well. So you've got news navigation, nations navigation, and then various regions that have got various labels on them, which is, it gives you a lot of screen reader users, yes, but also now sighted keyboard users a very useful way of actually finding bits on the page that they might be interested in. And this is how you do the labeling for your regions. So I've got the BBC site has a nav, which is an HTML5 element, which maps to a landmark on a page. And you can have multiple ones on a page, as we can see. And then ARIA label equals nations. So that comes out, it gets externalized. The accessibility name of that element is nations, and it's a navigation source, so it helps people find their way around. Okay, that's all the browser extensions. I'm now talking about downloadable tools. And the one I'm going to talk about is the color contrast analyzer. And some of you who might have seen me demo this one before. Color contrast is important for many people, obviously people with poor eyesight, but also dyslexics as well, people to a certain extent with colour blindness as well. And it's important that when you're doing designs and building websites that you actually allow sufficient colour contrast into your designs, because otherwise people may not be able to see what's going on. But also we can all be temporarily blinded. If you're looking at something on your smartphone and you walk outside in the sunshine, I'm sort of shading the screen and everything like that, if there's insufficient colour contrast, it can make life difficult for everyone. And so the tool is, and here is the URL, it's available for Mac and Windows, from the Paciello Group, an accessibility company. And you get like this downloadable thing and you can fire it up, and the most useful way of doing it, you can select colours from the drop down there or put in the hex values if you want to, but the great thing about it there is it's got this, this colour picker here, and so you can select the foreground and background colours directly, and it will actually then immediately show you whether or not, and in this case it doesn't, whether it passes the necessary threshold for colour contrast defined by the WCAG guidelines, the accessibility guidelines. The great thing about this is because it's actually you're using the colour picker, it means that you can do it when you're using Photoshop or whatever design tools that you use before you even put it into a website, right? So you've got a design from somebody, you can say, let's have a look at the colour contrast of this and see if it's sufficient before you even commit to code. And here we go. So there's some buttons on this website. I can't remember which website it is. You know, sort of a light blue text with a light blue background with white text. If it's big enough, it passed. This particular one passed, but if it's small text, then it would actually fail. Okay, screen readers. I'm only going to briefly touch on this because this would be a presentation, full presentation itself, and some of you will have seen me demo screen readers before. They are used by people who are blind or who have poor vision. And basically what they do is that they read outwardly whatever's on the page in front of them. They're using the HTML tags that they find, so semantic HTML is very important here, obviously, and any ARIA labels, etc., that you might add to your elements. But they're not just used by blind people. It's important to realise that they are also used by people with cognitive impairments, some people who are dyslexic, some people who just need or want or like audible reinforcement for what they're seeing on the page. And that is why pretty much all screen readers have functionality in them which will actually enhance the experience for sighted people as well. There's a few of these. The NVDA, that's my favourite. It's a Windows only one, I'm afraid, but if you've got a Windows partition on your Mac, you can use it there. And you can get it from there. It's free. Unlike other screen readers like JAWS. JAWS is very expensive. I've got it on my machine here, but it's about, you're looking over £1,000 for a copy of JAWS, probably like £1,500 with 2 years worth of updates and stuff like that. There's a user guide here. Voiceover, for those Mac people. If you've got a Mac laptop, you can use Voiceover. It's part of your operating system, and you can fire it up. There's a guide there for how to use it. If you've got an iPhone or an iPad, it's also featured on every iPhone and iPad. You don't have to download it. But the VoiceOver on the iPhone, etc., behaves very differently to the one on your laptop. So there's a different guide for that too. There's a corresponding one for Android devices. My Android device has got TalkBack. It's sometimes preloaded in your phones, but other times you have to go and download it. If you're on a Samsung phone, you have to go to the App Store and get it. But it's pretty good. All right, next thing I'm going to talk about is the WordPress plugin. And it's called WP Accessibility, and it's created by my friend Joe Dolson. He's an American, and I've met him a couple of times as part of the WordPress accessibility group. There you can get the URL there, and what it does, it attempts to fix some common accessibility defects in WordPress sites. Now, it can't fix everything, and for some WordPress themes, it just doesn't work. But for some things it does. It's a bit like a sticking plaster though, or band-aid I suppose you could say in the States. It can fix a few things like lack of skip links if you've got links that don't have underlines, which of course provides a cognitive issue for many people. And it also can add, if you want to, a toolbar to the right hand, you put it on the right or left side, that can actually toggle like high contrast mode on the website, or also make the text bigger as well for people with poor vision. And I'll demo that in a moment. How long have I got? 10 minutes. 10 minutes, right. Okay, briefly going to talk about accessibility testing in Dev. As I say, I've not done this myself, but Axe, yes, it's the same company as the browser extension I talked about earlier. There's this thing called Axe Core. And it's a JavaScript library that you can download, and basically whatever development environment you've got, you can actually include it in that, and it will run a series of automated accessibility tests on whatever you want. And I think it's configurable as well. At some point I will actually try it out myself. It's open source and it's free, so you can use it. I also sometimes in this talk, I will do, feature another one which is available through a WordPress plugin, but that's a paid for service as well. It uses tenon.io. But as far as I can tell, they're very similar. This is the free one, so obviously the favourite for a lot of people. So there we go. And then there's useful URLs at the end, bang, 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 bang. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump out of my presentation and let's quickly demo some stuff. Okay, right, here's our favourite men's health website. And I'm going to press the tab key. So tab, 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 tab. You can see bottom left-hand corner that the focus is moving, but there's no visible focus order. So this is the one I'm going to demo first. This one's called Focus Indicator. So now, when I start tabbing around this page, the focus becomes a bit more visible. Can you see the blue ring? It's not a great colour. You can actually configure it in the options for the plugin in Chrome. You can actually configure the colour. So if it's not working for you, then you can actually choose a different colour. So that's cool. Let's switch that off. The next thing I'm going to use is the oh yeah, the focus order Favlet, that's it, that's why I couldn't find it. Okay, so here we go, let's get that going. Sometimes it takes a little while, there we go. Right, so here I've got these little blue squares with a number in. That shows me the order of focus on that page. So it starts right up in the left-hand corner, and the focus order does go a bit bizarre in the banner. There's also numbers missing in the navigation, but that's because obviously some of the navigation's not visible at the moment, because but it will become visible when I actually, where's my mouse? When actually I hover over it, like, here we go. Right, you'll see like it's got the missing numbers there. So it's a quick way of seeing where focus actually is. Okay, right, the next thing I'm going to talk about is, which one we're going to do next? Let's have a look at Axe. I'm going to come into here. This is a test WordPress website that I've put together. I'm sorry, I'm peering like this because I've got the wrong glasses on, but I'm going to get Axe going on here. So it's installed, but I don't actually access Axe from here. As I mentioned before, it actually becomes part of my inspector tools. So I'm going to do inspect, and I'm now going to find it in here. Right, so this is the initial state. I can see the website on the left-hand side. I do the analyze. So, oof, now it's going to have a look. It's very quick, usually. And you can see here it's got 4 different sorts of errors on this plugin. On this website. I've chosen a theme, not at random, because it shows off some of the accessibility failings. So I've chosen it on purpose. So, for example, elements must have sufficient color contrast. Let's look at those, and I bet you can guess what elements they are on this page. So here I've got highlight. So if I'm, notice now it's highlighting the element on the page, the first one. So if I now move to the next element, it's now moved down to the link Bristol here. So because this green on white, which is the default color setting for this theme, is there's just not enough color contrast really. Something going on. And so it's telling me how, in a sort of kind of a CSS way, how I can find this element here. That's the style that's involved. And then the actual source for the element is here, and how I can fix it. Basically, element has sufficient color contrast. So basically the idea is you change either the foreground color or the background color so that it makes sense. Okay, so that's the Axe plugin. Let's reload the page so it doesn't corrupt anything. Right, nextly I'm going to show you the landmarks. This is the plugin here that shows me the landmarks. Now if I can use it with a mouse to start with. I pop that down and now it shows me the various landmarks that are on this page. This theme is not great for this. I've got a banner at the top, that makes sense, navigation, presumably the main navigation here, and then some complementaries. And what it turns out is that every widget in the sidebar has a new complementary landmark, which is not that useful on its own, really. And then we've got some navigation. So if I click on that, it takes me to the navigation at the bottom and it highlights it, which is useful for me. Now, I'm a sighted keyboard user, so I won't be using my mouse. That's the wrong laptop. Let's move over here. And I'm at the top of the page. Focus is at the top of the page. I'm going to do Shift-Alt-L, which is the keystroke for getting this going. Notice it's now externalized the list of landmarks. Now, it's tricky to see, but you can see, hopefully, that I'm now tabbing through the various lists of landmarks here down to the navigation. I'm now going to press the Enter key, and so there you go. With this one particular browser extension, I have solved a huge issue for sighted keyboard users. I didn't solve it, I didn't write it, although I did help the guy who wrote it. Initially it was only accessible using a mouse. I actually, bizarrely, that no one else had thought of it before, I suggested to him that he make it operable with a keystroke so that sighted keyboard users could use it. So, and he did it pretty quickly, so that was useful. So this is a really useful tool for sighted keyboard users. Right, so let's get rid of that. Just reload the page. How am I doing for time? Pardon? 5 more minutes. Well, time stood still. Okay. Okay, right, okay. What's going on here? Right, now what I'm going to show you is the plugin that I mentioned, WP Accessibility. So it's installed here, WP Accessibility. I've activated it already. If we look at this, let's go to this page actually, because there's a lot of links going on here. And it's not the home page, which is treated as a special case. Oh, I was going to demonstrate Wave as well. Let me do Wave quickly first, and that's this little icon here. Okay, so this is what it looks like when you action the Wave plugin. So you've got a summary here, 3 errors, 20 alerts, 1 feature, blah, blah, blah. And it's got the next icon down will show you the details here. Okay, so what you get here is like, over on the left hand side, missing form label. So if I click that, it should highlight on the page, and it's in fact the search box over on the right. And why is this an issue? Because there is no, well, I've got a form control that doesn't have an associated label, which is a problem for accessibility. Even though there's a placeholder, which is okay for some people, it's not okay to just have a placeholder for everybody. I've got another error over here, so I can click on these icons and it tells me it's an empty button. Now we can see that that button's got a magnifying glass in it, which kind of implies search, but actually if you look under the bonnet, which you can using the little code tag, which is down here, you can see that this button, class equals search icon, type equals submit, and that's it. There's no text in there or nothing that gives you any accessible thing to hook onto. So a keyboard user, keyboard user can tab to it, but a screen reader user is not going to get any meaningful information out of that. So that's not clever. The other thing it can do is contrast, and it's picking up correctly that the contrast is a problem on all of these links. Now, in terms of looking at color contrast, I do recommend using that download tool. This is okay up to a point, but it's quite easy to spoof this. I haven't got time to go into that in more detail, but you will not get as reliable results doing it this way, but it does flag up some stuff. So there we go. That's the sort of thing that you can do with the Wave plugin. The last thing that I'm going to show you is the WP accessibility. It's in settings. Right. The first thing to note is skip links. Right. This theme does not provide skip links by default. So when I tab from the location bar at the top, the first thing that gets focus is the accessibility examples, the site name, which takes you back to the home page, not surprisingly. So what I can do here is I can enable skip links, and I've also put in the ID of the main content area of your page, because that is sensibly where your main skip link ought to go to. So now I update the settings and reload the page, and then tab. Oof, there we go. Skip to content link. If I now press the enter key, I'm now in the content area of that page. Okay. So that's one thing I can do. Let's keep that going. There's lots of other stuff as well. Let's add the accessibility toolbar and font size adjustment as well, and we'll come up to that in a minute. But the other thing that I'm going to do is one thing you'll notice on a let's go to a blog page here. That's not the blog page, is it? No, I want the blog home page. Sorry. Okay, here I've got a read more. There's a link that just says read more here. So that's not very meaningful. If you've got a blog index page and there's lots of links that just say read more, read more, read more, read more, you can actually fix that as well, because you can, where is it? I've lost it now. Oh yeah, here we go. Add post title to more links, right? So we'll, and the other thing I'm going to do as well for everyone's benefit is to force an underline on all links. So let's update those. Now we'll reload the page. First thing we've noticed that all the links on this page now have an underline, so it means they're a lot easier to see. It is literally all links on the page. But also this is what it's added as well. This wasn't there before. It's got a continue reading IST Southern Area, which is the name of this blog post. And so it gives you like this useful thing as well. As I said before, this is like a sticking plaster. It's not a perfect solution, but it can get you out of a hole, basically. There's lots and lots of options in here, some of which are appropriate, some of which I wouldn't bother doing myself. But I think I've covered the main stuff, really. Removing title attributes. There's very few extra title attributes in WordPress these days, so that's not a fine. There was one other thing that I wanted to talk about, but oh yeah, here we go. Automatically label WordPress search form and comment forms. Now, when we saw Wave on that page, the search box didn't have a sensible label. But now, since I've changed that option, if I reload that page, still not a label, but if I actually now do an inspect element, you can see that the plugin has actually put in a sensible label for me. So now when a screen reader arrives at that input field, it's got a label. So my friend Joe has created a fantastic plugin here that does some really useful stuff. And it helps you learn about accessibility as well, because you can understand potentially why stuff's being done. And so there you go. And that is the pretty much end of my presentation. So let's get that back. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Graham. I've got time for a couple of very quick questions. If anybody's got any at all? Any questions?
I was going to say, if you're starting out and you just want to, obviously there's lots of tools.
Yeah.
So if you were just starting out doing this, what would you recommend as your sort of like first tools for sort of getting into making sure that your site's accessible?
Okay, well the first thing I'd look at is the Wave tool and the Axe tool. The Wave tool is great. It's just immediately lots of icons on the page, and you can kind of find out a lot about what's going on from the labels, the tooltips it puts out. Ironically, it's a very visual tool. It uses colour to convey meaning. It's got tooltips and everything like that. But it actually is a quick way of finding out where an automated tool thinks things are going wrong. Then you've got the Axe tool, which does kind of a similar job, but also will then help you to understand more about what's going on. So those two, I think, are your go-to ones, really.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions at all? No? Brilliant. Well, thank you very much,
No,
Graham.
of course. Yeah. Cheers.